I want to welcome everybody here to the Baseball Heritage Museum at League Park. This, I believe, began this event recognizing Sandlot baseball and everybody out here in the audience. 2017, I think we first started talking about it, but our first big event took place in 2018, and we had a lot of people at it. We have a really nice crowd here today, and again, I want to thank everybody who comes out to enjoy this program and to help us tell the story of Sandlot ball, which we believe is a very important part to the game of baseball, but also to our community and to the region around here. Cleveland was probably the epicenter, I like to think, of Sandlot baseball. Had some of the best ball players come out of these programs, and we're just very excited for you all to be here. We worked really hard on getting a good day for you, so we've got sunshine out there. I do also want to thank everybody who is contributing to the Baseball Heritage Museum, which is a 501c3, and we are working very hard on continuing to tell the story of Sandlot ball. So if you were here for the first event, you would have seen a small exhibit in the museum. Today, if you go back in there today, you'll see that we have expanded it. We are working very hard on continually changing the exhibit and expanding it and telling the stories of Sandlot ball. So with that, again, I want to thank everybody, but if I could just for a minute, because I've always been told promote, promote, promote. Many of you have already made donations to the museum. We greatly appreciate it. If you haven't, please think about it. If you have not gotten one of our cards here for our program coming up September 20th at the Music Box, we are going to be throwing the first pitch for a year-long celebration celebrating the Cleveland Buckeyes. Does anybody know who the Cleveland Buckeyes were? Yep, so the Cleveland Buckeyes won the 1945 Negro League Championship, and they played here at League Park. So we will be doing an event then, and I'm hoping that you all can come to it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to your leader here, Mr. Grimes. Okay. And I appreciate all the hard work that everybody does here.
Well, I don't know if this thing will hold this, but I need my notes, okay, so I don't forget anything. But anyways, I want to thank you, Bob, from all of us Petruno Sandlot old-timers for giving us this day to gather to remember our golden days, reliving our days on Cleveland Sandlots. I don't think we realized back then how special Cleveland Sandlot baseball was, because it was always there. And we had nothing to compare it to. Contract cards, permits needed for practice times, lighted fields, yearly statistics books, paid scorekeepers, annual Sandlot days at the municipal stadium to raise money, dragged diamonds, perennial backers who funded many teams, and great coverage by all three newspapers. And there's a guy over here, Danny Coughlin. Can you stand, Dan? This guy. Sorry about that, Danny. Next time I'll have you raise your hand. Okay. But this guy gave us such great coverage, and we really appreciate him. It's so great to see you here, Danny. Well, they were for us too. But anyway, so great to see you. Well, all of these things added up to make Cleveland Sandlot the very best program in the United States. We didn't know it then, but we sure know it now. And this museum has done so much to remember and celebrate this great history. This year, to show our gratitude for all the museum has done for us, we are expressing our appreciation with a donation drive to support the museum, and I have an envelope of checks from donors who have already stepped up to the plate to give to the museum today. And if any of you want to see me later today, I'll be happy to take whatever you're willing to donate to give to the museum. Now I want all of you to notice the plaques that have been added to the Visitor Center. Of icons, John Nagy and Ray Schmatzer. And these were done by Ricardo Rodriguez. He personally put them up. We thank you, Ricardo, for allowing us to honor these men, plus Frank Petruno, Gary Roggenberg, and Rich Rollins. And I do want to have Mrs. Janet Petruno and David Petruno. You can just hold up your hand, Janet. Let's give her a hand. That's Frank's beloved wife and his son, David. I'm so grateful to have you here, and grateful to David because he gave us a picture of Frank for us to keep to welcome future Sandlotters that come to this reunion. I thought that's very fitting. And Gary and Rich will have their spots here and there. And Frank Petruno, we're going to get his plaque too that we gave to him. So those 5 guys will be up here, and it's only fitting. And now I want you to know how grateful I am to those who have helped me plan today's event. Last year, I said Phil Bova and I would be stepping down from our leadership role, and it would be our last year of doing so. No one stepped up to replace us, but because of our love of Sandlot baseball, we could not let this event die. So we rolled up our sleeves for another go-around. Unfortunately, Phil can't be here because he developed COVID on Wednesday, and he was prepared to honor Gary Roggenberg, who he coached with at Cleveland State. Phil would have added a lot. He'd have you rocking and rolling. I know how passionate David Schmatzer is about this reunion, but he lives in Texas, where it's very hot. He lets us know that all the time. He would be a perfect leader for this event, but his location makes that impossible. But I can promise you this. He, along with Tim Wells, would be 2 of your greatest allies in planning and perpetuating this reunion. And you could count on Phil and I to support you too. We wouldn't leave you standing in the lurch. Needless to say, Tim Wells, Dave Schmatzer, and Phil Bova have been my backbone this year. I've been in contact with them almost daily since the beginning of this month. I could not do this without their help and support, and I deeply appreciate their commitment to this reunion. I've received many nice compliments from old-timers, but please let these men know how much you appreciate them, because they deserve even more credit than I do for this event, and I sincerely mean that. With that being said, there are others I want to mention that have made today's event what it is. John Babin. Where's John? There he is. He's hiding over there in the corner. He raised his hand. Let me tell you what he has done for us, and then we can give him a nice round of applause, because he deserves it. Every year, John has provided us with classy programs about our reunion. In my mind, these are keepsakes and collector's items, which I truly treasure. He never asks for expenses incurred in doing so, and he won't let me give him donations to his work. He is a true professional and a gentleman who adds so much to this affair. John, there are no adequate words to express my appreciation to you. I'll just say thank you, buddy. Let's give this guy a hand. Next man up is Gary Oring. Gary is a true soldier for this event every year. He is always ready to do anything we ask of him, from moving tables to bringing coolers of water to picking up plaques or pizza. You name it, Gary will do it. and I really appreciate him. Let's give him a hand. A good man. Next is Mary Oring, Gary's better half, Teresa Zigman, and my wife Lenore. These three gals add so much to our sign-in table and are always ready and willing to do so. This year, Mary was able to email me Phil Bova's note cards honoring Gary Roggenberg, because Phil was going to be the guy to honor Gary, after Phil learned he had COVID and could not be here today. Of course, it was Gary who picked up the cards and the plaques that Phil got for this event. That was a huge stress reliever, thanks to Mary, because she was able to transmit those via email to me. Whew, that was a relief to get that. Because, yeah, it's Gary. So they're connected. My wife, Lenore, and she's not in here, has been an immeasurable help to me by listening, supporting me, and giving me advice, and providing her superb technology skills. She is a master, and I'm so lucky to have her in my corner. I also want to thank TV 20 for providing video coverage today, and this was all arranged by Tim Wells. And that is a perfect segue to Tim Wells, who's going to speak with you next. Yeah, let's give these people a hand. The ladies, I forgot to give them a hand. Thank you, Gary. Set me straight, pal. I blew it. Sorry about that. Yeah. I want equity here. You need me to hold this?
I will just lay it right here.
Okay.
You can get it if I lay it right here, right? Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Tell you what, I stayed up late last night and watched Fox 8 and Danny Coughlin with Friday Nights, and it just made my whole day. So thank you, Dan, for...
It made my night, and Dan killed me.
As Al mentioned, there was a lot of people that put this together. Al's been the leader. As he mentioned, John with the program, and so many more people. Again, we are so grateful and thankful that this happened. And thank you, Al, for everything you've done. When I coached baseball at John Hay and Lincoln West High School, one of the questions that I had on the first test, and you got to picture this is the first test I'm giving these high school student athletes. What was the largest crowd to ever see a baseball game in Cleveland? Now keep in mind the old stadium had 80,000. So I gave multiple choice, 80,000, 42,000, and 115,000. How many know? And if you look right over here, there's the proof. On October 10th, 1915, right here, Sandlot Baseball at Brookside Park. What was the largest crowd to see a lighted amateur baseball game under the field lights? Was it 40,000, 100,000, or 50,000? How many know? The answer is 100,000. It took place in 1938 right at Brookside Park, and that event was sponsored by the Cleveland Baseball Federation. The other known fact today is that numerous baseball athletes went on to play Major League Baseball who started right here in the Cleveland Sandlot program. The media coverage in the Plain Dealer at that time was filled with pictures and box scores. And I'm going to ask Bob Fortuna. Where's Bob at? Please stand up, Bob. I'm going to make you stand up. He's one of the writers that was doing that back then, and he'll verify. And again, our thanks to what you did back then. Thank you, Bob. As well as Al mentioned, the Sandlot program back then had outstanding sponsors like Wenham Truckers, J. Schrader Company, Ferry Cap and Screw, Aromatic Valve, Woodland Jewelers, LaRich Ford, Rosenblum's, because this was the elite program, not only in the city, but as he mentioned, in the country. The Baseball Museum, Heritage Museum, the founder, who is with us today, Bob Zimmer, he started his dream with a jewelry store where they placed baseball documents in them, which led to the Baseball Heritage Museum beginning in 1997. And I can tell you, he didn't have much help, even from the city, but it was Bob Zimmer who said, we're going to make this happen, and he was determined to make it happen. And Bob, please stand up and be recognized for making that happen. In addition, some former players from the top level of the Cleveland Sandlots are here today. Would those players please raise your hand, because you know what it meant to Sandlot baseball back then. Please raise your hand and be recognized. Now, I'll tell you this. I know in your day, I don't know if they ever did this, but I'm guilty of it. I have played some pranks, Danny, in my time. I remember working at my center, and the project was, here's 5 tomatoes. Put some white tape around them, get some red stitches. Who can come up with the best baseball? Little did they did, and then the next night I went, snuck it into the game. When I went out to the mound, the kid hit the ball. I won't tell you where the tomato ended up, all over the place. The very next day I played, the umpire walked up and he says, anything goes in this game other than a baseball, you're gone. I'm just telling you that before we start. But baseball was supposed to be fun. It was supposed to be that way. So Sandlot baseball is still being played today. If you walked in, you saw kids playing right here on the same fields. The Cleveland Guarding Charities has been the huge partner. They have provided all turf fields like you see here at League Park, Brookside Park, Luke Easter Park, which some of you may remember as the old Woodhill Park. All of our youth and teen league participants play free. Full uniforms, equipment, umpires are all provided free to them, including if a child walks up in our leagues, whether it's teen, youth, and they don't have a glove, those gloves are provided to them, but they have to earn it, meaning you come to all the games, it's your glove at the end of the year. And that has helped us get kids into the game of baseball. There were coaches' trainings, players' clinics, life skill lessons, and Cleveland Guardian player visits to our fields has been so well received. And this happened. Can you imagine, just for a minute, look at a child's eyes, and he's at his field, and here comes Jose Ramirez to their game to talk to them right before the game and support them. What kind of feeling did he have? The City of Cleveland Rec Department provided the fields to play on, the transportation for those rec center travel teams in our leagues to get to their games and take them home so they would be safe. Major League Baseball started a new program called RBI, and it wasn't for runs batted in, it was reviving baseball in the inner city. And it started in 1989, and it's expanded. And what they do is our kids play in our leagues, then they try out for this RBI team, and they can play that, and fully paid for. That means when our kids go play in a regional tournament, let's say in Indiana or Pittsburgh, everything's taken care of. Housing, the security is provided, the meals are provided, everything. And the World Series, I was part of one of them. I remember we had a police officer coaching our team, and we went to Los Angeles, California for a World Series. Now, it was in actually Compton, and at that time in Compton, California, that was the #1 city in the country with crime. And our kids went there. And ladies and gentlemen, they came back as the world champions in that division. Our Cleveland kids. Today, surrounding suburbs, Cleveland Little League organizations join into our program because the number of those teen participants for a league works best for everyone. Yes, Little League Baseball organizations in our city are still active today. Sandlot Baseball's biggest impact today is still alive. The proof is right here in this room. You think about it for a minute. How many of us still cherish those fond memories of when we played? How many of us have said, when I played, this happened? I spoke yesterday with a former Sandlot player named Jack Single, who shared his memories of a 1956 perfect game with 16 strikeouts in Class B. This is the same time that Rich Rollins and Gary Roggenberg played in our AAA league. Many of our volunteer coaches are former players. They are giving back to the children today. Those children playing on League Park, that shows you today their love for the game. This is in August, the season's over and they're still playing. Yet today, it became so important that our youth must have good role models teaching the game of baseball, but more importantly, life skills. They need to know somebody cares about them. It's a completely different time. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you for being a part of a proud Sandlot baseball program.
Thank you, Tim. You need to know that Tim carried the torch after John Nagy at City Hall. He's the outgoing, he was the director of organized sports for Cleveland City, and he just recently retired. And I appreciate just hearing from him how things are today in Sandlot baseball, because we get so little coverage from the media. It's kind of like disappeared. But thanks to Tim, he let us know that there's still life out there for our kids. I remember a great quote that I saw in one of the statistics books that came out every year with all the batting averages and things like that, fielding averages. And it said, give a boy a ball, a bat, and a place to play, and he'll never go astray. I think that was the motto of the Cleveland Sandlot program. And I thought, man, that's very fitting. Anyway, thank you, Tim. Thank you for all your years of service to our kids from Cleveland. Now I'd like to remember Rich Rollins. When I played with him, Al Drew, who was the manager of our 59 team, used to call him the Redhead. And I kind of liked that nickname, but I couldn't do that. I had too much respect for him. But the old timers could call him the Redhead. Anyway, Rich got his start playing Class F in Parma. And eventually it led to a 10-year major league career that began with the Minnesota Twins in 1961 and ended with the Cleveland Indians in 1970. He also played for the Seattle Pilots and the Milwaukee Brewers in 69 and 70. During his career, his lifetime batting averages was .269 with 77 home runs and 399 RBIs. In his first full year with the Twins, Rich made the AL All-Star team 2 times, receiving the most votes of any AL player. Mickey Mantle was on that team. Okay? When I learned about this stuff, it blew me away, really. He also finished 8th in the AL MVP voting after hitting .298 with 16 home runs and 96 RBIs. That's his rookie year. But I have to throw this in. He was brought up the previous year at the end of the year and had a few at-bats. Okay? But one of those at-bats was against Ryan Duran. Some of you old-timers remember Ryan Duran. He was one of the first closers along with Dick Raditz in that era. Anyway, Rich faced him with the bases loaded and hit a triple off of him. And that's a kid that they just brought up. In 1963, he hit .307. Welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
Okay. He hit .307 in 1963 with 16 homers, 61 RBIs, despite an early season broken jaw. Rich was originally signed by the Washington Senators with a $6,000 bonus in 1960 after completing a stellar career playing for Kent State. And one of his teammates, Paul Serra, is in the back. He just came in. They were teammates together. His 3-year batting average at Kent was .389. He played only 2 years of minor league ball at Wilson, North Carolina in 1960 and with the Charlotte Hornets in 1961 before the Twins brought him up at the end of the season. The following year in 1962, he beat out a guy by the name of Harmon Killebrew for the third base job and then went on to play in 2 All-Star games that year. That's pretty impressive. I have to add this. Clark Griffith, who was the owner of the team, he kind of nudged the manager, I think it was Sam Mealy, put this kid at third base. And because he was the owner, that's what happened. And that made a huge difference for Rich. Rollins' Sandlot history looks like this. After a fine career at Parma High, Rich was asked by manager Norm Payne to play on his Class B Rosenblum's team. This was in 1956. He was small and was a catcher, and Norm had an experienced catcher. So Payne moved him to second base, where he hit .329 with 6 doubles, 2 homers, and 27 RBIs as Rosie's won the Class B title. Where do I get these stats? Those statistic books that were out there at the end of every year. Plus, Bob Sudik wrote a great article, which I have, and I'm going to draw your attention to this. I had a collection of these great articles of Rich when he first made it to the big leagues. And I was waiting for the right time to get them out. And I put this together to give to the Rollins family because they should have it. There are some great articles in here. And I got some good information from reading these, especially the information about his Sandlot career. Anyway, if you get a chance, you got to see this, and I'd like TV 20 to make sure they capture this in some way, because these are outstanding articles. There's a picture here of a guy you all know, Tito Francona, who's at first base when Rich is running to first base. Just great stuff. Anyway, continuing with the Sandlot years, in the next 3 years, Rich starred for Rosenblums as they moved up to Class A from Class B. And he hit .337 in 1957, .339 in 58, and .320 in 1959, leading Rosies to the Class A percentage title. And I was fortunate enough to be a member of that team. In fact, we have that team captured on this. Of the guys that were on that team. Rich's dad was a former minor league pitcher who started working with him when he was 3 years old. When he was 12, his dad took him to the park and threw as hard as he could. And the redhead hit everything. That's when his dad knew Rich was special. And the rest is history. His dad knew what he was talking about. The Indians gave him tryouts twice, but were not interested in signing him because, quote, he wore glasses, was too small, and couldn't hit the curveball, unquote. He surely made them pay and eat those words by doing major damage to the tribe during his career. On a personal note, I had the good fortune to play with Rich on the '59 Rosenblums team as a right fielder. I was a rookie out of West High after making the All-State team as a catcher, but Rosie's had a seasoned veteran catcher, Steve Piscotch. So I started Class A as an outfielder. I really looked up to Rich because he not only was a great player, but carried himself with class and was like a mentor to me. He was very low-key and humble, and I was so happy for him when he made it to the show. I felt very special knowing I played behind him in 1959. I could not ask for a better role model. In my 11 years in Class A, Rollins had the quickest bat I ever saw. It was like a laser. And it was no surprise to me that he made it to the major leagues. At this time, I want to call up his two sons and grandson, Jim Rollins, Pep Rollins, and Rick. Because I want them I want to present to these gentlemen, show them our honor for Rich and his special career as a former Sandlot ball player. And I want them to know that this plaque will hang up here with our other great Sandlot icons. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for the stories.
Is there anything you want to say?
Anything? Well, if you don't mind, honestly, this is special right now. My dad's not in real good health. My mom's not in real good health right now. And hearing some of these stories, you know, obviously we've heard the major league stories. You talk about the All-Star game. The one thing you left out of the scouting report is he's bow-legged and slow. So that was another thing. Didn't look like a major leaguer. You know, we all got that as well. But looking at some of the names in this program, and it was handed to me today, you know, these are names we grew up with, and a lot of times we don't make the connections. We knew Mr. Roggenberg, good friends of the family, Mr. Petruno actually worked at the gas station at the end of your street in high school for many years. So I remember going by and knowing where those connections started.
Best hair ever, by the way.
Knowing where those connections started and hearing the stories of the Sandlot are some things that we didn't get a lot of. As he's been sick, you get a little introspective. You go back and look at his career and stuff. And that All-Star game, you know, you can get anything on the internet now. There's stuff on the Sandlots out there, but that All-Star game, they have the play-by-play. And one of the coolest things, you know, we have that opportunity. My dad, he's lost a lot of his memory, but we still watch the Indians games and stuff when we go to the assisted living facility. And some of the conversations we had go back. He doesn't remember well, but I could walk through that box score of the entire 62 All-Star game, that first game. And what a lot of people don't know is he started that game, he was the first batter, and you mentioned some of the names, but you know, you got Roberto Clemente in there, you got all of these names on that National League team that were unbelievable. Koufax. And I told him, I said, did you know in 62 you were the first batter at the All-Star game and you got beamed by Don Drysdale? He goes, huh? What? What are you talking about? So I never knew that. I don't know that he even remembered it. But he played 7 innings in that game. And in the box score, in the 7th inning, it says Rollins replaced by Robinson. So that's Brooks Robinson. He came in after the 7th inning for my dad. So rarefied air, cool stuff. All started with the Sandlots, and he's been. We've been all Cleveland residents most of our lives. You know, we moved here from Minnesota or Seattle when we were 4. I was 4 anyway. But these memories are special, and this day was special. And for those of you who know my mom, she told me to tell everybody hello and thank you for this. So thank you.
Thank you so much for embellishing my story, because you add some real juice to it. I don't know where I heard this story, but this might have been in the second All-Star game he played in. But this story came out where Rich was in that All-Star game with Mickey Mantle. Okay? And you're nodding your head, so it must be true. They both started the game together and were taken out of the game. Okay? That's what they do in all-star games. They don't all play the whole 9 innings, at least in most cases. So they both exited the game at the same time, and they went to the shower together. And there's Rich showering with the great Mickey Mantle. And I guess the Mick said something to him, hey kid, he goes, how you getting to the airport? Something like that. And you know, Rich, I don't know what his reply was, but he said, why don't you ride along with me and we'll go to the airport together. And I thought, man, what a great story that is. But that's what baseball's all about. It's about stories like that. And there's a million of them in this room.
Hey, Al, you're missing the next day, though.
What's the next day?
The papers read Rollins leaves All-Star game early. Nothing about Mickey Mantle.
Rollins leaves All-Star game early?
There was nothing about Mickey Mantle.
Nothing about that. But you know that story's true, or pretty close. Thanks for verifying it. But that's awesome. And as I said, I'm so glad that you could all be here today, and we could honor Rich, because he really deserves it. I enjoy writing that story, I can tell you, right? And you can tell I did. Now I'm going to remember Gary Roggenberg. I heard his name butchered so many times. Rogenberg, often. And I found out his name is Roggenberg. That's how it's pronounced, okay? And his name is Gary, 2 R's, Roggenberg, not 1 R. That was butchered too. He doesn't deserve that. Anyway, my first encounter with Gary took place at Edgewater Diamond number 1 in the spring of 1957, when I faced him as a sophomore left fielder for West High School. He was on the mound for St. Ignatius and proceeded to dominate the game in a lopsided win for the Wildcats. I remember him throwing a 12-6 curveball coupled with a live fastball, and he blew me away, along with the rest of my teammates. As I walked away after getting struck out, I said to myself, man, this guy is unhittable. Fortunately, I never faced him again on the diamond, but played against him on the basketball court the next year. He was just as awesome on the Ignatius team that destroyed us in both encounters that we played him. He was quick, owned the boards, and shot the lights out. At Ignatius, Gary played with future major leaguer and former Sandlot player Mike Hegan. And he was All-State in hoops in 1958. After graduation in '58, Gary continued his education at Dayton, where he got a full scholarship, no-brainer, and his excellence in both sports. How rare is that? In 3 varsity basketball seasons, the 6'6" forward led his team in scoring every year, and in his sophomore year, he hauled in a school record 32 rebounds against Miami of Ohio, and made All-American his senior year, leading his team to the NIT national title. In baseball, he set school records for single season ERA, .33, and for a career, his entire career, .75. That's not too shabby. So when you hear that, you can understand why the Twins went after him. After receiving his BS in PE in 1962, Gary turned down an offer from the Philadelphia Warriors after being drafted in the 4th round. I never knew that. Instead, he signed with the Minnesota Twins for a $12,000 bonus. In his first year of pro ball at Erie of the NYP League, and Paul Serra played in that league, I know that. This was in '62. His record was 13-4 with a 2.07 ERA. This is an interesting fact. In his second pro game, he came 1 out away from a no-hitter when a ground ball took a bad hop and bounced over the third baseman's head. After the season, he played in the Twins' Florida Instructional League. After spring training in 1963, Gary made it to the Twins roster that quick and was used primarily in relief with some spot starts. In that year, in 50 innings, he had a 2.16 ERA and was 1.44 in his relief appearances. After the season, he pitched again in the Instructional League, but developed bone chips in his elbow, and eventually had surgery, which cost him the entire next season, 1964. In 1965, he started the season at AAA Denver and posted a 9-3 record with a 3.22 ERA and 81 innings of work. And in late July of 1966, he returned to the Twins, who went on to win the American League pennant and pitched 12 games in relief with a 3.43 ERA in 21 innings. In '66, Roggenberg was traded to Boston after struggling with stints in Denver and Minnesota. He saw limited action on a ninth place Boston team. In '67, he spent the entire season on the Red Sox AAA team in Toronto, but after a strong spring training in '68, he made the Sox team. However, after 4 appearances, he had surgery again on his elbow. In '69, Gary was sold to the Seattle Pilots. In June, he saw limited action there and retired at the end of July. He did substitute teaching in the Cleveland schools, and I remember the year he was kind of like a full-time sub for our phys ed teacher. And I remember him playing in the faculty game, because I was a member of that faculty. We both played in a faculty-student game, and my buddy Kenny Kovac was a student at West at that, and he reminded me of that game. And he said, yeah, you played with Gary, and you guys killed the seniors. But that's because Gary would get the rebound and throw it the length of the floor. And I'd be under the hoop under there. That's why we beat him so well. But I got a chance to get to know Gary a little bit, but he was a quiet guy. So that was another time I had experience with my relationship with Gary. Now for Cleveland State. From 1972 through 1976, Roggenberg joined forces with Phil Bova to coach baseball at Cleveland State. During that time, CSU compiled an 86 and 76 record, which was the best record at CSU up to that particular time. The following CSU players made it to the major leagues during Gary's tenure: Jerry Dubczynski, Cleveland shortstop, and later White Sox, and Dale Mahorsik, who signed with Texas and eventually played with the Yankees. Here's what Phil had to say after coaching with Gary. Phil, unquote, said, "He's a consummate professional and a very dear friend." Phil wanted to make sure that I mentioned that, because that's how much he respected Gary. In 1970, Gary was inducted into the Dayton U Athletic Hall of Fame and named to the school's All-Century team in 2004. In 1986, he was inducted into the Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame, and in 2012, he joined the Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame. On the Cleveland Sandlots, Gary played for Collier Construction and Rosenblum's in Class A. And I'm very sure he played with Frank Petruno. They were teammates. That's Gary Roggenberg. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. He's not doing too well. And we weren't able to get anyone from the family here. But thanks to Phil Bova, who arranged to get these plaques, Gary's plaque will remain here next to Rich Rollins. So when you come back next year, you'll be able to see these up here. And we are extremely grateful for the museum for giving us this space and giving us this date. And thanks to John Babin, you all have programs that'll let you know when the next reunion is going to be. This time, I want to thank all of you for coming here today to honor these gentlemen. They're all special.